Here we go with another exciting episode of our show. This week we bring to you 3 amazing reviews of new retro games, and first in line is the incredible Ghouls'N'Ghosts Arcade Remake for Commodore Plus 4. We continue with Tantooman, a smart but tough puzzle game for the Commodore 64, and we conclude the reviews with the excellent Shift, an ingenious puzzle platformer for the MSX1 systems. Our hardware review this week continues the retro gaming portables inspection with the Anbernic RG406V, a great but flawed upgrade, and we give you a little update on the evolution of the RG40XXV status. In our DOS and Win Vault, we race with a thrilling new game, Ventura, that brings back fond memories of the Outrun days, and in our Retrospect, we dig up the progenitor of all the 3D grid-based dungeon crawlers, the mighty Dungeon Master. In our Retro Adventures, we play the funny and spooky new episode of the ongoing series of Ines and Uncle Lee adventure games, Uncle Lee's Cookbook, 5 Recipes for Disaster. We also look back for a retrospect review of what was probably Sierra's finest moment with the atmospheric and grim Gabriel Knight, Sins of the Fathers. Finally, in our history lesson, we remember the story of one of video game consoles history's most tragic losses, the tragedy of Dreamcast's demise. So, get ready for another thrilling retro ride. Welcome to this week's new retro games reviews. And we begin with the incredible remake of the classic arcade, Ghosts and Goblins for the Commodore Plus 4 by Tamas Sasvari, Steve Day, Carl Mason, and Saba Pankachi. For those of you who don't know the original Plus 4 version, it can only be described as abysmal compared to the system's actual capabilities. There was no sound, the graphics looked primitive, and they even missed a couple of levels. But not in this version. This one is graphics and sound galore, and one can be fooled that the game actually runs on the Commodore 64 system rather than the Plus 4. The graphics and animations of the arcade are all here, and there is even in-game music along with sound effects. The controls are tight, and the game is, as usual for a Ghosts and Goblins game, tough as nails, just as the fans of the series like it. The rankings are as follows. Graphics 9.3, Controls 9. The music and sound effects get a 9.4, and the gameplay a solid 9, for a total of 9.2, and the title of the Game of the Week. The Commodore Plus 4 finally gets the Ghosts and Goblins version it always deserved. This is a marvel of coding. Definitely try it out! Our next review is for the game Tantooman by Delta Machine for the Commodore 64. A very fast, very smart, and very hard puzzle game. You play as the Tantooman, and your goal is to paint all the floor of its stage at your color and, if possible, collect all coins. You choose a direction for the Tantooman and off it goes until it holds to an object. You must devise its course quickly as there is a countdown timer running for each stage. At the same time, though, you must choose your next move wisely, as there are dozens of traps like poisonous darts or spikes procuring off the walls. A minus of the game is that every time you lose a life, you're kicked back to the main stage of its level, lowering your limits of mistakes significantly. The graphics are colorful and cute with good animations. There is a very funky intro music, but no in-game tune. The sound effects are simple but well made and functional. The controls are very responsive and won't trouble you at all. It must be noted here that the game is a preview release, meaning obviously that more content will be coming up soon. The rankings are: Graphics 8.7, Controls 9.1, the music and sound effects receive a 7.8, and the gameplay an 8.9, for a total of 8.6. A smart, fast, and well-made puzzle game that would have scored much higher if it was a little bit more unforgiving. Our last new retro game review for this week is the brilliant Shift by Haplo Games. This is an amazing puzzle game that will have you scratching your heads to figure out the twisted solution of its stage. And when we say twisted, we mean it, as you have to twist the room's geometry in order to reach the exit. The game is presented in black and white graphics, and each time you press the fire button, you reverse the colors, effectively changing the outlay of the room, opening new paths for you and your way to the exit. You must also jump over hazards, turn on switches, and overcome a number of other dangers. The mechanics of the game are simple but brilliant. The graphics are black and white, as this is essential to the gameplay, but your character has a very detailed and well-made animation. The game comes with wonderful in-game music that will keep you on your toes. There are no sound effects to speak of, but that does not affect the overall mood. Thanks to the simple presentation, the game runs on an MSX1 system with 8 kilobytes of RAM. The controls are accurate and fair, with perfect collision detection, making sure that every mistake is yours and not the game's bad behavior. The rankings for the game are: Graphics receive an 8. The controls a 9.4. The music and sound effects an 8.7. The gameplay a 9.5. For a total of 8.9. Addictive, smart, and wonderfully designed, Shift will soon become your favorite MSX puzzle game. Give it a go! Welcome to this week's hardware review, and we have for you, in continuation of our retro portable reviews, the Anbernic RG406V. Now, if you recall, on our Christmas episode and the special review, I told you that I had another Anbernic on the way, but because of the holiday season, you know how posts are, it hadn't arrived yet. Now, it has arrived now, so we're ready to review it. Now, let's open it up. I have prepped it, of course. I'm just doing, you know, the whole unboxing ceremony for you. There, it's nicely packed. And I do love this protective foam Anbernic uses every time. I've taken the Super NES palette design. This is a fan because this is a Android console. It's the first Android console, retro console that I received from Anbernic, and it gets a bit heated when you're running demanding retro games, so it has the fan control here, and even for Android games, you know, heavier games, although that's not our intention to run something like that. Now, except the console, in here we have, I added that, the USB charging or data transfer cable, a screen protector, and a small manual. It's, you know, the typical Anbernic manual with directions, with instructions in English and Chinese, as usual. Not that you'll need it. You have us for this. Now, to the main course. Let's put this aside. This has a very, very sturdy screen. It's a touch screen. It's really different and more bulky and heavier than the RG406V that we reviewed a while back, and I'm gonna have an update for that console as well at the end of this review. I like it. They have corrected a few things, mostly the triggers that on the RG40 they were in a pretty inconvenient position, making me push the triggers unwillingly whilst playing. Now we have only one SD card slot here. We have a reset button, power on, and the volume controls. I like the whole Super NES design on this one. The fire button and the rest of the keys. There is a central menu key, select start. Also, there is a vast improvement on the control sticks. The feeling and the fact that they are actual analog control sticks. If you had one of the previous models, you do know what I'm talking about. The cross feels good. Now, the game console also has a multifunctional USB-C. You can charge it from here with the cable included. You can transfer your ROMs and data, and you can connect it to an HDMI if you have the proper cable. We'll be seeing this in a minute. Now, to turn it on, you just keep this pressed for a while until you feel the vibration. Now, as usual, I don't have installed the stock firmware. It's outdated. Anbernic really needs to synchronize its firmware, so I have installed an alternative that I will show you in a while. There. Now, as I told you, this is a touchscreen. You see, we have LEDs for the control sticks. The screen is very good. It's very responsive, although I did find that on the edges of the screen sometimes it does not register the touch, but that's a bit rare. Now, we're going to connect it on screen and we'll see how it works. We'll see how this runs, and then we'll come to our conclusions and a little update about the RG406V. Let's go. Now, we're here inside the system. As you can see, this is an Android system. Beneath it all, beneath the Gamma OS, is actually a tinkered custom version of Android. Now, these are all the platforms I have installed. Now I'm trying to see, you know, the keys here, because, well, it is quite different. It is. Now, I have installed some games in here. Let's see how they perform on the screen. It does look a bit better, more vibrant, there you go, than the RG406V. There you go, press start to play. All right, let's go. Yes. Now, there, some music. It plays wonderfully. It's very responsive. The game, on the other hand, well, not so much. Now, there is one button alone to get into the RetroArch main menu. Let's go back and back. Let's try another platform. Bomberman. As you see, it's pretty fast. I must say that the hardware is a significant upgrade from the previous Anbernics. It's pretty fast, it's pretty strong, but the music is very good. Yeah, I'm terrible. The problem was, and still is, the fact that the Android has a special setup that you need to do. Some emulators work, some are incompatible, they have various issues. I did not manage to achieve the success that I achieved on the RG40 after a lot of setups, of course, a lot of settings, a lot of tinkering. Let's say an Atari Lynx game, yeah, as you can see, that works as well. Oh wow. Well, I've never played this one. Huh. Now, I did notice that when you exit from full screen mode, the settings up here that appear, sometimes it remains on a small characters mode, so-called immersive mode, and the letters, the menus, everything is way too small. These are all the problems that come with Android, and they carry on to the console. But it is a significant hardware upgrade. It all comes down to the software, and as always, Anbernic needs to work on that. Let's go sum it up. Now, I must say that the console gives very good impressions, but as I told you before in our on-screen review, there are some serious problems with the Android. First off, I do not appreciate the whole mini tablet feeling. I do believe that the best versions of these consoles, these portable emulation consoles, if we may call them, is with Linux. Honestly, the only console that I've seen working differently successfully is the Steam Deck. But the Steam OS is practically a Linux, so we end up in the same conclusion. Of course, we're talking about a whole different price range there. Now, I do like the touchscreen, I do like the battery, it's really an upgrade. I like the feeling, this is a sturdy console, it's very well built. Even with the alternative operating system, the Gamma OS, you're still confined within what the Android can do and what is it compatible with. It creates a whole new mess with the cores and the emulators, and it kind of keeps you away from a unified experience. As a system, as a device, it's a huge upgrade, but the firmware and the fact that it runs on Android holds it back, to my opinion. So this is a very good device hardware-wise, but so-and-so software-wise. I would rank it at about 7 out of 10 as a complete experience. If I were to judge it on a hardware level, I would probably give it close to something like 9, because it's really well built. It is heavy enough to feel sturdy, but not to exhaust you whilst playing. I do appreciate the USB, the multifunction USB input-output that gives a very good signal. There's still only the classic headphones socket, no Bluetooth support. Theoretically, with the stock firmware, you wouldn't have the problems I had connecting Bluetooth headphones. And I did manage to connect them to the Gamma OS, but they were kind of unstable. So this also needs a little work, unless I've done something wrong. But it wouldn't affect my ranking anyway. So, now that we're done with this, I want to give you the small update on the RG406V. Now, the last time we've seen this, I gave it a medium review, let's say. Kind of quick, but I did tell you that although it has a wonderful screen that can only be surpassed by the Trimui Brick Hammer, which has an amazing screen, this is really close. It has a pretty good battery as well, with the exception of the kind of poorly placed triggers that forces me sometimes to push them without wanting to. This is a very good construction, but it did have a lot of incompatibilities, and the most important alternative stock firmware, the Newly, wouldn't run because Anbernic, halfway through production, switched the screens, the provider of screens, with newer, much more advanced, much better. I cannot disagree with that, and that was a good move, but that caused incompatibilities with almost all the alternative OSs, and specifically with Newly, that is supposed to be the best. But the team behind Newly had an upgrade ready these days. I did download it, and well, guess what? Skipping ahead, voila! Now it can run newly, albeit an alpha version. It's pretty stable though, don't worry. And I have loaded it with pretty much every ROM that I have converted from my personal collection of retro games. Every ZX Spectrum tape, every Amstrad CPC disc, every PC Engine CD-ROM, all the things that gave me hell before. And the only complaint I have right now from the device is the fact that for some weird reason, in these last categories, which I don't even have any games installed, like Zelda Classic, ZX81, it kind of stays on that screen whilst booting up for, I don't know, a minute or so. You're seeing it yourself. Well, fast forward, I won't have you waiting. Now, this took about a minute and a half. I won't hold it against it because I do not know if it is the operating system's fault, my fault on some settings or something. Anyway, now, a console that wasn't able to run about 50% of the systems out there because of the fact that it was confined in specific firmware. Now, with newly installed, it runs all sorts of amazing software. X68000, couldn't get it to run for... I tried everything. Now, well, see for yourselves. It is kind of slow to boot up the games and to start. But, as you can see, voila. What else? I mean, I had really big trouble with the PC Engine software. I could not get it to run. The PC Engine CD-ROM software. Really. And now, there you go. Works like a charm. It is a significant upgrade. Every system you see here, yes, even some coupe, every Amiga, everything, sincerely. If I recall, even BBC Micro worked, although it did give me a bit of hell on the boot up, some games. Let's see, I really do not recall for the BBC Micro, but yeah, sometimes it just stops at the prompt, but the basic operating system runs. And you can type in commands, of course, if you connect it to a TV out. Now, is it perfect? Okay, let me put it this way. As it is now, it is perfect, yes. But here is the problem. It took me approximately 2 weeks to set it up correctly, to install all the available games, to do all the necessary things. So, is it worth it? If you get time on your hands and if you want to, tinker with it and you enjoy the process, yeah, the end result is amazing because the screen is amazing, the console is nicely built, and you have practically every system under the sun running at the end of it. If you just want a system that the maximum of things that you will do is just install an alternative firmware and you're good to go, no, it's not worth it in this case because it's not gonna work like that. It needs a lot of tinkering. So it's your choice. I just thought to be fair, I had to mention that now Newly works on it, and if you install it and set it up and take the time it needs to do all these things, it's a whole different experience than the one I met initially. So, as always, it's your call. And thank you for watching this week's episode. See you next week. We begin our DOSVolt review with a new exciting racing game. This is Ventura by Louis Gorenfeld. Essentially a spiritual successor to the classic Outrun, but with a view from the inside of the car, Ventura is a fast and exciting racer with 6 different areas to race through and a variety of other vehicles to hinder your progress on the road. The graphics are very well made, colorful and with great animation. The sound of the engine and the great soundtrack will have you racing in the asphalt on your way to the next checkpoint with excitement. The controls are very tight, with gear shift, brakes and turn control all here and accounted for, and all very responsive. The gameplay is based on the simple Outrun formula, but the game is so nicely made that it becomes addictive, and you'll always want to get to the next area, giving that one more try feeling. The rankings are: the graphics get a 9.1, the controls a 9.1 as well, the music and sound effects a 9, and the gameplay an 8.9 for a total of 9. A great racing game for the MS-DOS that will have you hooked in no time. Our Retrospect review this week has a very special guest. This is the granddaddy of all first-person grid-based dungeon crawler RPGs. This is Dungeon Master by FTL Games. Initially released for the Atari ST back in 1987, it soon came to the PC and became the golden standard by which all computer RPGs were measured for many years to come. For those of you who somehow managed to be oblivious to its existence to this day, Dungeon Master has you exploring an underground dungeon filled with enemies, treasures and deadly traps, whilst moving on a grid-based system and seeing the action in first-person mode. You have 4 team members that you resurrect at the beginning of the game, armed with anything you can find along the way. The graphics and sound of the game for its day were simply amazing, and the control system was intuitive and soon became the new standard. The rankings are as follows. The graphics receive a 9.2. The controls a 9.4. The music and sound effects a 9. And the gameplay a 9.5 for a total of 9.3. Dungeon Master was possibly the most important RPG of the 80s and a huge leap forward for the genre. Time to revisit the dungeons. In this week's Retro Adventures, we review for you Uncle Lee's Cookbook, 5 Recipes for Disaster, a funny and smart point-and-click adventure game by Apicisi and relatively painless games.
Why I suggested it.
You play as teen girl Ines, and you must deal with the disasters left behind by your crazy uncle's quirky experiments in a 5 episodes adventure. Keep in mind that the game is still in demo form, but should be completed soon and published by Dionus Games. This is the 6th, if we're not mistaken, in a series of adventure games named Ines and Uncle Lee games. The graphics of the game are pixel art style, and they are wonderfully drawn and beautifully animated. The game's areas are pretty, very pretty, and create a spooky and at the same time fun atmosphere. The game has full speech dialogues provided by some really talented people. The music is also of high production values, just like the rest of the game. The game has a great sense of humor that brings back fond memories of other hilarious games like the Monkey Island series, whilst keeping its own style and not falling into copycat lame jokes.
The Trinity.
The puzzles are fun and logic, and will not give you trouble with crazy demands. The controls are simple, and there are a variety of choices to adjust them to your gameplay style.
Sorry, I can't understand.
The rankings of the game now are: graphics receive a 9.1. The puzzles get a 9. The music and sound effects are awarded a 9.4, and controls and gameplay a solid 9, for a total of 9.1. A funny, smart, and quirky adventure that will keep you entertained and make you wait impatiently for the full game. Guaranteed.
Of one per customer, while supplies last. Offer limited to the ebook version of the spells. Cool. Hello.
In our Retro Adventures retrospect today, we look back to Sierra Online's and Jane Jensen's masterpiece, that is Gabriel Knight, Sins of the Fathers. The game was a first for Sierra, not only because it was the first game that Jane Jensen collaborated with the company, but also because it was the first Sierra game with so mature and grim storyline.
She sounded great, and we had a nice little chat.
You play as Gabriel Knight, a charming, old-school, bad boy type of guy that, along with his friend, employee, and sometimes babysitter, Grace, keeps a rare books store in New Orleans' French Quarter. Soon you'll get involved in the ongoing mystery of the so-called voodoo murders happening all over New Orleans, and get to discover your family's dark and important secret. The story of the game is simply amazing, and it becomes even more elevated in the CD-ROM version of the game that provides full speech for the dialogues by the voice talents of legends like Tim Curry, who voices Gabriel. The music is also on par with the sound, and the graphics remain one of Sierra's finest moments, with colors perfectly chosen for each scene and areas that seem to jump out of a painting. The game utilizes an enhanced version of Sierra's SCI-2 engine, and it's a breeze to use and play. It is icon-based, of course, with no text input involved. The animated cutscenes, even though short, are also wonderfully made, and in the game's voodoo folklore mood. The puzzles are intriguing and demand some good thought without ever becoming too hard for the player, whilst keeping interest high. The game was and still is a staple in Sierra's record and in adventure game history in general.
Pick your brain a minute.
The rankings of the game are: graphics 9.4,
Got a second?
puzzles 9.2, music and sound effects 9.5, and controls and gameplay
About
9.1,
I was supposed to
for
get
a
some-
total
Is that right?
of 9.3.
Yeah. I got something for
Gabriel Knight, Sins of the Fathers, is a unique experience as much as it is a near-perfect adventure game. Don't miss the chance to revisit it.
A wooden doll with horns is on the back.
Looks like Jack Nicholson. Reminds me of a book critic for the New York Times.
The Dreamcast is considered by many to be the ultimate retro console and Sega's finest creation, and yet it all went down in flames back in the day in a failure so epic that it forced Sega to retire from the console manufacturing race for good after 18 glorious years. So what happened, and how could a console so ahead of its time and so perfectly designed lead to such an unfortunate result? Welcome to our history lesson, and today we look back to the greatest retro console ever that died an untimely death. This is the tragedy of Dreamcast's demise. Back in the early 1991, Sega was still riding high on the glory of the unprecedented success that was Sega Genesis. The company had made the impossible: to transform from an underdog and also run in the market into number one, dethroning, even temporarily, the seemingly undefeated Nintendo from the position of the absolute ruler of a video game console market. A successful and edgy advertising campaign had positioned Sega on the market as the cool company, and the Sega Genesis, also known as Sega Mega Drive in Europe, as the console for the trendy teen and the cool youngster, whilst making Nintendo seem like a kiddish company, better suited to small children and families that want to play safely rather than edgy. It was during this period that Sega started experimenting with various ideas to expand its hardware range, making sure not to leave the existing console behind, since it was still making the company a lot of money. These experiments resulted in the creation of two peripherals that had medium to bad crowd reception. The first one was the Sega CD drive, a CD-ROM expansion that provided Genesis with the ability to load and play games and music from a CD medium, whilst providing a minor hardware upgrade to the main console by adding a faster complementary CPU and a custom graphics chipset for some enhanced capabilities. The add-on was placed a bit high on the price range though, as it launched at $299, a price equivalent to $711 today, and a price higher than the console itself. The software range was also limited, and very few games provided something worth playing beyond remakes with the addition of full-motion videos and CD-quality soundtracks. Then there was the 32X. This add-on was created to provide the Genesis with the power of a 32-bit machine, and as a stopgap until Sega had the next generation console ready. It needed its own cartridges and a separate power supply, locking in place on Genesis cartridge port. The 32X was also a bit steep on the price side, launching at $159.99, a price equivalent to $390 today, whilst Genesis at the time had dropped to $140, about $333 in today's money. The 32X's cardinal sin, though, was its untimely unveil in 1994, almost simultaneously with the release of Sega Saturn in Japan, turning the add-on effectively a redundant piece of hardware and preventing developers from giving it a chance, opting to wait for the Sega Saturn, US and European releases instead. Sega 32X sold an estimated 800,000 pieces of hardware, a pretty low number even compared to the Sega CD's 2.25 million sales. And then there was the Saturn debacle. Sega, in a move that can only be described as panic, after learning of the Sony PlayStation specs and seeing that consoles like the 3DO failed spectacularly to make a mark on the market, even though it provided CD-ROM medium and a lot of horsepower under the hood, it still couldn't hold a candle to the PC's rise as a 3D powerhouse. So, Sega, in order to compete effectively in the 3D graphics area, did a last-minute redesign of Saturn, adding a second main processor, a 3D GPU, and turning the machine into a nightmare for coders. That, combined with the catastrophic Sega Saturn Day launch in the US, a surprise launch way ahead of the initially announced date, effectively leaving most retailers without stock, save a few, alienated the players and infuriated the retailers, tarnishing the good name that Sega had built all these years. Sega was bleeding money fast in a market that was a whole lot different than the ones it conquered a few years ago. Nintendo was struggling in second place now with the outdated Super NES and the Game Boy Color, providing most of the income, since the company's famed 64-bit console was still not ready. Sony, the new kid on the block, in a move that started as a vendetta with Nintendo for the betrayal in the CD-ROM add-on business, had turned vengeance into a massive success with the PlayStation, effectively wiping the floor with the opposition and grabbing first place on the sales board. Saturn was struggling to maintain a long-distance second place, and things could only get worse once Nintendo's Ultra 64 console finally arrived. Designs for the next-gen console had already started in 1997, with Hideki Sato as head of development. The machine's specs were really impressive from the get-go and avoided extravagant and costly designs, avoiding the mistakes made in Saturn's creation. It came with a Hitachi SH4 CPU at 200 MHz, a NEC Power VR2 GPU processor capable of some cutting-edge 3D graphics, and a Yamaha AI-CA sound chipset complemented by an ARM7 CPU at 67 MHz capable of playing music, sound and special effects on 64 channels. The console had 16 MB of RAM, 8 MB of video RAM, and even 2 MB of audio RAM. There were also a few new and unique for the time characteristics. Firstly, the console was the first one to support out-of-the-box network connectivity since it came equipped with a 56 kbps modem, one that would be replaced later on the console's life with a broadband adapter. Secondly, Microsoft developed a special edition of Windows CE including DirectX API support to help port PC games to the console easily. Also, for save game storage, the console came with a new cartridge-style unit called the VMU, effectively both a storage memory card and a mini console into itself with a small LCD included. Last but not least, the console had keyboard and mouse connectivity, a characteristic not seen in a console since the days of the Adam computer module for the ColecoVision. It must be noted here that the creation of Dreamcast was not without drama, as there were initially two different factions struggling for Sega's approval of their designs for the console. Besides Sato's specs that we just described, they're codenamed White Belt and later on Dural, and designed in-house in Sega's Japanese HQ, there was also a competing team in the US HQ. Sega's newly appointed CEO at the time, Soichiro Irimajiri, that replaced Tom Kalinske, attributed the weak and failed Saturn hardware to the Japanese development team's bad and uninspired designs, and wanting to get a new and original view, in parallel with Hideki Sato's development, he asked Tatsuo Yamamoto of IBM in the US to secretly develop an alternative design of the console. That project was codenamed Black Belt and had a series of significant differences, such as the 3DFX Voodoo 2 GPU combined with the Voodoo Banshee and a Motorola PowerPC 603E CPU at a proposed 240 MHz speed. Eventually though, and according to various Sega executives' testimonies at the time, Sega opted for the Japanese solution because it also included collaboration with Japanese manufacturers like NEC and Hitachi instead of the American 3DFX, IBM and Motorola. Thus, the Project Dural, renamed once again as Project Katana, of the Hideki Sato team, was put into the production line, and soon Dreamcast was born. The Japanese launch was set for November 27, 1998. The specs of the console impressed both the crowds and the press. The console was really powerful for those days and far ahead of anything else on the market. Even the mighty Nintendo 64 could not hold a candle to the marvel that was Dreamcast. But there was a characteristic on the console that would come to be its undoing: the storage medium. Sega, in an attempt to keep costs low, did not opt for the new video and data format, the DVD, but rather chose to equip the console with a GD-ROM, with GD standing for Gigabyte Disc, a new format created jointly by Sega and Yamaha, and packing a 1 GB storage space, whilst costing as low as a common CD-ROM unit. Believing that DVD-ROM was still years away from establishing itself as the mainstream standard, Sega had just made a terrible miscalculation that would have catastrophic results long-term. For the time being though, Dreamcast was having one hell of a launch. The Japanese stock sold out within a day from the launch, even though there were only 4 titles available. In the US, almost a year later, on September of 1999, things were even better, with Sega setting a world record for launch day sales and making more than $98 million within 24 hours. This was achieved in part thanks to Bernie Stoller's, Sega of America CEO at the time, efforts that repaired relations with American retailers that had gone sour after the catastrophic Saturn Day. This was achieved by providing them with 300,000 Dreamcast units for pre-sale orders and allowing the Hollywood video chain of VHS rental stores to rent the console to their clients. combined with the now 15 available titles for Dreamcast and a retail price at $199 that was just right, everything seemed to be a smooth sail. All these were combined with a successful European launch 2 months later, in October 1999, when Sega managed to push more than 500,000 units initially, an amount that was raised to 800,000 units by early 2000, followed by a price drop to £149.99. But there were clouds gathering, preparing the perfect storm for Sega. The first signs of trouble came when, shortly before the Dreamcast launch, Electronic Arts, longtime ally of Sega and provider of the precious sports licenses, bailed out, accusing Sega of a company that was not to be taken seriously anymore and asking exclusive sports games rights for the console in order to retain their relationship. The long-time partnership came to an end. Sega could not grant EA that exclusivity since it had recently bought Visual Concepts, a software company specializing in sports games. Despite the EA-Sega divorce, Visual Concepts managed to fill the gap successfully, with some of the titles provided by them, such as the NFL 2K, widely considered back then and even now superior to EA's Madden NFL. The worst was yet to come though, with Sony preparing the ground for PlayStation's successor. The PlayStation 2 was announced on March 2, 1999, and the specs given to the press were quite impressive. The system's main CPU, the Motion Engine, may not have been that much faster than Dreamcast's, clocking at 294 MHz, but the rest of the specs were making Dreamcast seem obsolete. 32 MB of RAM, 4 MB of video RAM, 150 MHz GPU, Dolby Pro and DTS ready sound chipset, and an HDD ready slot, all were characteristics that showcased a true next-gen machine. Now, we all know that Ken Kutaragi had greatly exaggerated both the CPU's and the graphics synthesizer GPU's actual capabilities, but the main problem for Sega was the storage medium. The PlayStation 2 had a DVD-ROM as a main storage medium, and even though Sega was right about the high cost of the DVD, preventing it from becoming the standard immediately, this was the exact reason that Sega should have included it. Whilst the home DVD player would fetch prices close to $1,000 just to play movies, Sony with the PlayStation 2 provided with as little as $299, an equivalent of $600 today, both a gaming console and a DVD player system, not to mention the 4 to 8.5 GB of data storage available for game developers. This provided the system with more complex games that resembled closely those of the mighty PCs, rather than the arcade-style Dreamcast games that seemed to be relics of the previous eras of the coin-op ruling days, no matter how impressive they looked. After the PlayStation 2 announcement, Dreamcast sales seemed to halt worldwide. By mid-2000, and with the market riding high on PlayStation 2's anticipation, Sega reported $163 million losses for the 6-month period. The sales fell short of 2 million units, selling 3 instead of the initially projected 5 million Dreamcasts. Even the much advertised SegaNet, another Sega first, by being the world's first centralized internet gaming service, could not save the day, even though it impressed both the press and the players. The PlayStation 2 launch in March of 2000 effectively put a stop on Dreamcast's early easy sales. Sega resulted in desperate measures, offering cash rebates and even going as far as gifting a DVD player with every Dreamcast console sold. All this resulted in even greater financial losses, with Nintendo having already announced the Nintendo 64 replacement in the face of GameCube to a warm reception, and rumors that suggested Microsoft was about to enter the market with a mysterious new console named Xbox that would bring the power of the PCs to the video game market, it all proved too much for Sega to handle. Isao Okawa replaced Soichiro Irimajiri as CEO of Sega, and backed by Sega's co-founder David Rosen, the decision was finally made to withdraw from the video game console manufacturing market. The company halted all Dreamcast production and cleared out all stock, with the last unit to come out of the factory being signed by all of Sega's internal studio design heads. Sega continued to service and support the machine as late as 2007. The company went through a huge reorganization, with a third of its employees being laid off. The company survived the transition from a hardware manufacturer to a software publisher and developer, thanks to a major help from the late Okawa, who, having loaned the company $500 million back in '99, shortly before his death, forgave the debt and even gifted his Sega stock worth of $695 million back to the company. The markets received the news of Sega's transformation into a software publisher and developer with a sigh of relief, something that further boosted confidence in the company's future. After 2 hard years, in 2003, Sega finally reported profits, ending the transitional period in success and rolling in credits to a huge and important chapter in the video game console industry. The Dreamcast was a console that did everything right. It was designed with specs ahead of its time, it was marketed carefully and aggressively. It was easy to program and develop games for, and it had a number of firsts. But Sega's previous mishaps and a grave mistake in the storage medium choice resulted in an early and frankly unjust death. Today, Dreamcast is loved in all the retro community as one of the best and most beloved consoles of a company that brought the cool factor in the video games industry.